Thank you so much for joining us today. As you may know, September is Hunger Action Month. Excuse me. I'm thrilled that many of you here today have been able to visit our small but mighty food pantry. In honor of Hunger Action Month, we're going to be discussing today hunger and suburban food insecurity. The COVID-19 pandemic made us realize the importance of our food pantry and the tremendous work that they do here each week to ensure that our community members have access to fresh and healthful foods. Today, we'll hear a little more about what's happening at the pantry, hear how the pantry has grown, and look ahead to what we hope to grow and continue to serve our community in new and different ways. At the end, I'll also leave some time for questions. I always feel like people have a lot of questions about the pantry. It is my honor to introduce our wonderful guest today. Karima Samadi works as a food and agricultural knowledge integration specialist at The Ohio State University. She has engaged in food systems work for over 15 years in various programs ranging from child obesity prevention, food and agricultural education, and food insecurity research. She leverages her public health research experience to influence policy systems and environmental change through science communication. Previously, Karima was a research coordinator for the research projects HEAL MAPS, which is Healthy Eating, Active Living, mapping attributes using photographic participatory surveys, Voices for Food, and Prosper, which is promoting school community university partnerships to enhance resilience. With her experience in research coordination, she has recently transitioned into a role as a food and agricultural knowledge integration specialist at The Ohio State University, helping to deliver the broader impacts of research through integration and translation. Jennifer Wilcoxon, welcome, Karima. Thank you for being here. Jennifer Wilcoxon is our beloved director of the Albany Food Pantry. She has been working with the pantry in various roles since 2018. Jennifer developed a passion for helping people with food insecurity issues when she was volunteering for the organization. Then she took on the role of pantry manager for a year before stepping into the director's position. Under Jennifer's leadership, the team has expanded its open pantry shopping, summer meals, resource library, and school snacks program, and launched a grant-funded English language learners program. Since 2018, the pantry has more than doubled the number of families served per month and expanded its reach to over 500 children via open pantry and the summer meals programs. Jennifer has been instrumental in doubling the pantry's annual budget and brings an increased focus and community awareness to the subject of food insecurity. Jennifer is an alumni of Vanderbilt University with a BS in neuroscience and chemistry. She earned her PhD in neuroscience at Northwestern. She is brilliant. Yeah, there's three right there for you. She earned her PhD in neuroscience at Northwestern University, completing her postdoctoral work at University of Chicago. Jennifer resides in New Albany, is married, and has 4 children who are students in New Albany schools. Thank you, Jennifer, for all you do. Thank you both so much for being here today and for everyone here participating and who cares about the food pantry. It means so much to us. I want to first start with Karima. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at Kirkland?
Sure, yeah, and thank you all for having me. This has been such a wonderful experience getting to learn about the community and hear the wonderful pantry, hear about all the great things that you all have done. Yeah, like Angela mentioned, my background is research in public health, but before that, I was a community nutrition educator. So I was, like I think Irene was showing me, teaching low-income, limited resource families where their food comes from. So that's really where I got my start with The Ohio State University through the Cooperative Extension Service. And I was working in a county office, so focused more on rural food insecurity, but really got to see what that lived experience really was like, you know, because we hear hunger and we hear food insecurity, but you know, oftentimes our conceptions of what it actually looks like on the ground is very different. And so my undergraduate degree is in nutrition, and so I was, you know, doing more community nutrition education. Then had an opportunity to earn my degree in public health, and then leverage that to then do research with food insecure families. So at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, I had the opportunity to engage in what is called, everything's an acronym, right? But CDPR, which is community-based participatory research, which is just really saying you're engaging with the people you're doing research with. So it's a different approach where you're empowering folks, you're training them, and this used a GIS technology. You know, our little phones have the Google Maps. Well, this was a little while ago, so we had those clunky Garmin units that we used to put in our cars, and we would ask families, like, show us what a day in the life looks like, you know. And so we gave them these little Garmin units. They were taking pictures of food that they were accessing or not accessing, or maybe they had to walk to get their food because they didn't have transportation. And so these photos and also the routes that they took to get their food really told a story. So that's what's meant by the lived experience. It's different than numbers and data and income and all. You're looking at actually what a day in the life is like. And so that research with the Kirwan Institute was through the lens of equity and inclusion. And once the families that we engaged with shared their stories, we then gathered the community, kind of like this, and had a community conversation about, okay, these are the barriers in our community. What can we do to alleviate those barriers? For example, we did this similar project in Butler County, Ohio, which is Westchester, has similarities to New Albany. It's like a bedroom community of greater Cincinnati, so north of the city. Where the first IKEA was in Ohio. That's what usually people know it for. And it was a suburban community like New Albany, and one thing that was a barrier for people was transportation, because your low-income and limited resource families were living in an apartment complex, and there were no sidewalks to get to the grocery store. And so people were walking on the side of I'm going to blank out on this name, but a really busy road, and actually Dublin Granville, you know, walking on the road to get to the grocery store, which we know is really dangerous, especially if there's kids tagging along with you. So doing this project, in short, helped us get the word out. One of my proudest moments was having a state representative attend our community conversation where families were sharing their stories and their routes. And she was so impressed with, enlightened, I should say, that there was food insecurity in their community, which a lot of times we know can be stigmatized and hidden. And she felt inspired to tweet our story map, which was like an online map and storytelling platform that we use to showcase the work. But all that to say that the work that I did with Kirwan around food insecurity was really about engaging families and getting beyond the numbers and really trying to understand what that lived experience of food insecurity is like.
Thank you. That's specifically what we're here to talk about today, is the suburban food insecurity, and it's a little bit different sometimes than discussing rural or urban food insecurity. Can you talk a little about maybe the background or how the services and demographics may be different for food pantries in the suburbs?
Yes, yeah, and actually, one of my, I don't know how many of you folks were here when Glenn and Fusion came to talk. She's the one I used to do research with, and she's like the pro. She's in city and regional planning, so those folks know all about, you know, the history of housing and development and suburbs. So I'm going to reference one of her journal articles, but what we do know is that poverty is growing fastest in the suburbs, and this is nationally. This is not just Ohio. This is not just New Albany. Across the nation, there are more people in poverty in suburbs than there are in urban and rural areas combined. And why is that? You know, well, started out back after World War II when people started to move to the suburbs for various reasons, but you know, maybe it was wanting to have the, you know, the country and the city, you know, having more space, you know, and really it was as urban areas were changing too. So this was kind of on the cusp of like the, you know, civil rights era, but we saw a lot of segregation happening in cities. So, you know, when schools became integrated again, there were families that didn't want their children to integrate in schools, and so there was, you know, suburban sprawl. So we started to see suburbs pop up, and really that growth in suburbs has not slowed down since post-World War II. And what we're seeing now, kind of with our second wave of demographic shift, is immigration. We're seeing people who maybe lived in the cities before move out into the suburbs because of economic mobility that maybe wasn't there before. So what that's done is put a strain on the system where there wasn't any infrastructure before. So we know that, what happens often is, their suburbs might be resource rich, but they're coordination poor, because cities and urban centers are used to having, lots of social services around, and it's easy to boom, 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 connect the dots. It's all on one bus line. Everything you need to be comfortable and have a high quality of life, we know where it is, we can connect the dots. Well, it's not like that in suburbs. In fact, what happens is, the same barriers that people have in urban centers are not alleviated when they come into a suburban space. And so there's definitely, we need to do something to change that. We need to expand services like the food pantry that does so much for the community, reduce some of the stigma around things like poverty, housing, food insecurity, create more economic opportunities. So I can go on and on about, and I'll actually maybe send this out to you if you all would like to read about suburban food insecurity, because it goes more into the history and zoning and planning and what that does. But essentially what it's saying is the potential for hunger has no zip code, and what we're seeing with the growth in suburbs is there's also a growth in poverty. And with that, you see also lack of knowledge, stigmatization of using public assistance, difficulty accessing food stamps. There's less food stamp usage in suburbs than there is in urban centers. And so, we definitely, it's a call to action. We have work to do to help make it easier for families.
Thank you. And I know that we're seeing some of that in the pantry. And maybe Jennifer, you could describe, certainly in the last year and a half, the impact of COVID, job loss. I think that adds another dimension. But just in general, the statistics, who we're serving, any information like that.
Yes, for sure. The need for our services has grown exponentially in our community since March of 2020. So just to give you guys an idea on our numbers, since March of 2020, we've served 327 families, and just over 200 of those families were new to the pantry. And a lot of them came to us saying they'd never used a food pantry before. If anything, they've been on the other end donating to food pantries. 1,175 people, 44% of those were children, 8% seniors. We've provided over 236,000 meals. So again, just to give you an idea, that's a 93% increase in meals provided and a 61% increase in people using our food pantry services.
In the last year, year and a half.
Yes, that's a lot. Yes, and a lot of people just coming to us in crisis situations, job loss, illness, death, just really needing that immediate help.
And I think that's certainly a misconception that there is no need inequality. You may not see the concentrated poverty like some people think of food insecurity equate it with, but certainly that need is obviously here in the community. Can you describe kind of the difference between the crisis situation or the situational poverty that you're seeing versus that generational poverty? So what are the families coming here? Maybe tell us, a couple examples of why a family of the 200 lady that you cited that were new this year, what caused them to have to seek a pantry in this case?
So a lot of them lost a job due to COVID, needing to support their families, not really sure what to do. We had a couple too facing eviction, and we were able to put them in touch with some housing assistance services. We have a lot of families moving into the New Albany area too for the schools. A lot of them are from Venezuela and Colombia, and they have friends or other family members that are already here and moving into the district to provide the education for their children and coming here with virtually nothing. So they come to us and we connect them with food and then hopefully some other critical resources that they need.
And the statistics as far as the percentage of kids in our district that are on the National Free Reduced Lunch Program
is about 10% of students in the New Albany Plain Local School District qualify for free reduced lunch.
So that's about, what, 450 students here. How about summer meals? I feel like this has been, interestingly, this summer has been an avenue for people to learn about the pantry and access it. Can you talk a little bit about the summer meals program?
Yes, so our summer meals program is an amazing program led by Julie Anderson the last few years, an amazing volunteer. So what it is we provide breakfast, lunch, and snacks for students every Sunday for the week, during the summer when school is not in session. And I've had many people ask in the last few months, is the need the same? Is it decreasing? And actually our summer meals program this year, we had 10% more students participating than last year and provided 25% more meals this summer than we did last year. And it was a shorter window of time with the summer break being shorter for the New Albany district, but we had 14 new families participating in the program this year.
Can you describe how the pantry gets its food? Do we purchase it? Is it given to us? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Being a partner agency with the Ohio Food Collective, for every $1 donated, we're able to purchase up to $10 worth of groceries. So we do purchase food from Mid-Ohio. Also, as a partner agency, we're able to get produce, milk, bread, and eggs free from them. We also work with some corporations and organizations in the community. So we receive donations from Kroger, Giant Eagle, Target, Whole Foods, Fox in the Snow, Starbucks. And just today, we received an amazing donation of flowers and produce from a local church.
Yes, the All Saints Episcopal, right?
Yes.
They have a beautiful community
Yes.
garden, so we're getting a lot of produce and beautiful flowers every week.
We are, so hopefully most of you were able to see those when you toured the pantry.
Karima, can we talk a little bit? I feel like we beat a dead horse, but I feel like we really need to raise awareness about social determinants of health, what they are and how they impact our community.
Okay, sure. So the social determinants of health is a public health term that really is the conditions that help people to live where they live, work, and play, which is very general. The conditions in which people live, work, and play. So that includes housing, employment, with income, food insecurity, of course, transportation, education. You know, those are the determinants that help determine quality of life. Really, is what it comes down to. You know, whether it's enables or disables, the opportunity, your ability to thrive. That's a social determinant of health. And so, if you were to go a little bit beyond that and deeper into that, you could even look at health insurance coverage, healthcare access. Those could also be considered social determinants of health. So food insecurity, is one of those, and because it's a lack of consistent food, access to food, and one thing maybe not a lot of people know is that there are varying levels of food insecurity. So the USDA has 4 levels. 2 of them are called food secure. So you'd be in a very high food security or a high food security level, and those are people who don't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. Whereas the food insecure population, those are low or very low food insecure. And how that's determined is by a survey. So the USDA conducts every 5 years this household food insecurity survey. And they do a sample. Let's get a significant sample size. Obviously, they can't survey everybody, but several thousand people that are representative of the demographic of the U.S. Or they look at municipalities. So county level is usually where it's determined at the county level. And what that tells us is, where does our community stand? Are they able to get food? Are they worried about where their next meal comes from? Jennifer mentioned job loss, and we saw that a lot with COVID, that really disrupted not only households, but the food supply system in general, so coordination that food banks and food pantries were already doing was just amplified because there were so many people in need, so all that to say that food insecurity is one of the biggest social determinants of health, because we also know that, you know, the food we eat that nourishes us also is such a big contributor to our health, right? I mean, look at all the leading causes of death: heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer. Those are all diet related, you know, so we know that if we can put food in bellies, hopefully good and nutritious food, the food that we see in the pantry here, people are going to live better lives. Children are going to be able to perform better in school. And so, you know, these social determinants of health really have rippling effects for families, the economy, you know, so that's why, you know, food insecurity has gotten so much attention in the past, I'd say like a couple decades or so, you know, and especially with the pandemic, really brought it to the surface, where you had first-time visitors, like you said, people who were afraid, you know, probably didn't want to accept a handout, you know, but they needed it, you know, because if you're making a decision of whether to get shoes for your kid or going to the grocery store and shopping, you know, and those are difficult decisions to make, you know, and then again, you don't want to send your kid to, you know, school in November with sandals, you know, and so services like such as this help to, so that families don't have to make those decisions. They can focus on things like, you know, their kids getting into soccer or, you know, traveling to see their family for the holidays. You know, those are the quality of life things we would prefer for them to focus on rather than where their next meal comes from.
Well, and it just sprung to my mind, one of the first Venezuelan families we had, we literally got a call from one of the principals, and Julie Anderson. She said, "We have 2 kids here. It was January in shorts and flip-flops and t-shirts. Can you help this family?" And so Julie Anderson, our summer meals person, came over and said, "We need to get some." They had nothing. They arrived here through Miami from Venezuela, literally fled in the dead of night and came here. They had an apartment, living with a bunch of people. Julie packed up some clothes and we got food and took it to the apartment. She said she walked in and there was literally one lamp and all the people sitting on the floor. They came with nothing. And now I have to say, they are all working. They just bought their first home in Grove City. And it's unbelievable within 3 years how they came from nothing, with kids with flip-flops in January, to excelling. The kids play soccer, they play baseball, both parents are working. It's unbelievable. We feel like it's a little pantry, but the work and the lives that it's changed, it's remarkable. And I think the resource library is something to talk about as it relates to social determinants of health. I think the pantry team kind of came up with this before we even knew the term social determinants of health, but it made sense because a lot of times people come in the door that are food insecure, they often need other resources. So maybe Jennifer, can you just briefly describe how that resource library is matching people with those resources?
Yes, so we have been fortunate enough to have been working with American Food Pantry. The last few years, and their primary project has been to expand our resource library, because we find often that families come to us and need resources other than just food. So our first American Food Vista member actually did a needs assessment, and we then were able to determine which resources our families needed, and then developed our English language learners program. Hopefully some of you were able to meet Angie. She was in the pantry. She is our ELL program coordinator. And under her guidance, we have launched 2 programs to help our families learn English. The first one is Conversation Partners. And so we match an English language learner with an English speaking volunteer. And we ask them to meet, and obviously with COVID, it was virtual. With the original plan, it was in person, like have a cup of coffee with a friend, but we changed that. And they were meeting virtually once a week, having a conversation, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. Some of them made plans to meet in person when it's safe to do so. Some of them were practicing job interview questions and just sharing experiences and culture and life and just practicing basic English. And then we had a group of pantry clients who did not qualify for that program. They didn't have even some basic English skills. And so, as Angela mentioned at the beginning, we applied for a grant through the HMS Host Foundation, and we're able purchase Rosetta Stone language learning licenses for 20 users. And so we started that program in January for 20 pantry clients who did not qualify for conversation partners. And since mid-January, our 20 Rosetta Stone users have put in more than 750 hours with the program. And I just want to share a couple quotes with you about how the program is changing people's lives. I want to thank everyone who is part of the Rosetta Stone program. Since this opportunity has been a blessing for me, although I do not speak the language, I must admit that using the app, I have enriched my vocabulary, I have sharpened my listening skills, and understand certain conversations when I go somewhere. I continue with my commitment, and I hope to be able to write and speak the language very soon. Thank you very much for your valuable contribution. God bless you. And then one more. One other client told us, thank you very much for your support and dedication to this program. The truth is that my experience has been quite pleasant because it has allowed me to enrich my vocabulary in English. I just need to move forward with my conversation ability in English. Since I work with people who speak Spanish, I don't practice the language, and that's what makes it difficult for me. Thank you for your support. Blessings.
Well, I think that's what it is, right? It's taking those families that might be struggling and empowering them, and it just, you know, improves their lives in so many vast ways we don't even know about. Karima, when we spoke earlier too, you shared kind of your family history and your immigrant background. Would you want to share that?
Not at all, yeah. So my mother is from India. My dad passed last year, but he was from Afghanistan, which we're hearing a lot about on the news. And therein we have another refugee crisis. He actually first came to the U.S. in 1969 as an exchange student through the American Field Service, and saw the moon, first moon landing and moonwalk and all that. That was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He attended the Albuquerque Academy. Then he went back to Afghanistan in the 70s. I think there was like compulsory volunteer or military service. And this was like before the Soviets invaded and definitely before the Taliban. But, and then he got a scholarship to go to agricultural college in India, where he earned a degree in horticulture. And it was there that he met my mother, who was in medical school. And it was my grandfather, who was the dean of the agricultural college. And my mother was learning, she loved Persian poetry, so she was learning Persian. And my grandfather said, oh, I have this student from Afghanistan, maybe he can teach you Persian. And so that's how they met. And they kept in touch. But my dad moved back to the US and decided he wanted to try to settle here. And so was working on paperwork through his host family. And it's his host mom, who I called grandmother Audrey. I grew up with her as my grandmother. But yeah, then went back to India, married my mom. I was born in India, and then we all immigrated in 1985. He had the opportunity to bring his family as well, because that's when the Soviets were invading. And so he just saw that, this is not going to be a good situation. We should probably, see who we can bring here. So it was a bit of a process, but my two uncles with their families, came, and we all, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My dad didn't really ever want to go back. He was actually a translator for the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, and this was like in the 70s, and so he always said, like, I don't know what's going to happen if I step off that plane, the situation's not good, I don't think I can ever go back. So it was unfortunately a situation where, he could never return to, his motherland. But moving here, my mom, she was a doctor in India, but there were, they just passed some regulations on foreign-born graduates, and so she had to actually take her board exams over again and do residency over again. So for the first 6 years, we struggled quite a bit, just being, new Americans and assimilating, and language, of course. My parents were literate and fluent, but my uncles, they took ESL classes, and they were working and trying to get their footing and establish. So that was what I had experienced then. I think as a kid, you don't really notice you're different, you just want to fit in, but as I grew up, I really got more connected to my roots. You know, I'm half Indian and half Afghan, and so I grew up in Albany, New Mexico, where there's like Native American culture, so it's very like multicultural upbringing. And then I lived for a stint in like Appalachia, so I lived in Southeastern Kentucky, so really like I've adapted to a lot of different environments. But in terms of like my family experience, I mentioned my dad, you know, served the country at the embassy. My mother worked at the VA hospital for 10 years. I was in AmeriCorps Vista. My uncles were both contractors for the U.S. military recently, like within the last 10 years, you know, when, you know, the U.S. was in Afghanistan, training troops, and so they functioned as translators too. So all that to say, you know, we are immigrants, we serve our country too, we love our country, we give back, you know, and so I loved hearing the story of the Venezuelan family because it's really, you know, you have one conception of what refugees and immigrants are like, but you know, it really, you know, this is truly the land of opportunity, you know, and it's amazing what we can do together, and also what, you know, accepting new Americans with open arms can do to the community too, you know, revitalize it, uplift it, you know, contribute to economic impact. There's some communities in Dayton, Ohio, that are completely devastated by blight, and Turkish immigrants really turned around some of those communities. And so all that to say, you know, I know sometimes in communities that can be pushback or like, you know, oh, this is a lot, you know, we don't have the services for this, but, you know, keeping in mind that it doesn't take a lot, just with a tiny leg up, you know, our neighbors soon become our friends, and it really can, you know, that's what America's about, right? We're not being caught. And so, but yeah, I shared that with Angela last week, and we have one aunt that's back there that I'm trying to bring here. She was, you know, they were the northern part of the country, so they were safe, but now like nobody's really safe, and she has 3 daughters that all went to college there, but are not able to work how they would like to. And so I'm learning a lot about the immigration process that my dad used to handle, you know. Also, you know, legislation's changing, but refugee and immigrant families, when they arrive here, especially if they come through like a humanitarian parole process, are actually not eligible for financial assistance. So food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, affordable housing like Section 8. For sometimes 5 to 10 years. So these are people who are working and paying taxes, but they, you know, we have the assumption sometimes that they're, you know, using services or entitlement programs, but that's really not true. It's a really difficult process to get signed up onto those. So having communities like that are really helpful for those kinds of families that are just trying to get established.
Well, I think that's what we're learning here. It feels like there's a tremendous amount of diversity in this community of all sorts. And I think we see that certainly in the future. And it's providing us that opportunity to connect with places like Chris or other resources to connect some of these immigrant families with those tremendous resources that they need. I guess along those lines, I think it's important to talk, and I know your work focuses a lot on food justice. Maybe could you, in your bags, there's a brief research paper that Karima has provided. Could you talk a little bit about the racial inequality as it relates to food insecurity?
Yeah. So this is kind of an extension of the work I did with Kerwin. So we kind of combined some of that qualitative lived experience of food insecurity and overlaid it with some surveys, so some quantitative numbers. And we got to see the disparities and really that divide racially. And this was more, I don't think it included the New Albany zip code, so it was more like central Columbus zip codes. I think there were about 10 zip codes included in that study. So you know, food justice really is racial justice, because we know that in addition to, you know, barriers like economics and, you know, transportation and financial barriers to food access, there's also systemic barriers. So I think when Lennon came to talk to you all, she talked about redlining and, you know, how that really created food deserts. So I sent a list of like some terminology too, and if you didn't get it,
It's in the bags.
It's in the bags too. Okay. So the terminology really just outlines. It should look like just like a one-pager, but describes social determinants of health is on there too, as well as the levels of food insecurity. But food justice is looking at the system, the policy systems and environment that created an unequal access to food. So some of that is how neighborhoods are built. Some of that is discrimination, which kind of extends into maybe housing discrimination or discrimination with getting resources. And so this is kind of like a combination of people who are working on food insecurity work combined with like our racial justice movement. And so I also want to add on to their food sovereignty. And these are just definitions, like things you might hear, but this is how USDA, FAO, which is Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, define these terms. If you do hear them kind of tossed around here and there. One kind of new one too is food apartheid. So some people are substituting the word food desert for food apartheid because deserts are naturally occurring in nature, right? But an apartheid is an intentionally created divide. So that's, when we talk about communities where they've taken out grocery stores or they don't have, the sidewalks or whatever, those are kind of more created environment that causes food insecurity, man-made rather than naturally occurring. So that's where you might hear that in the news or articles that you might read. Another one, I wanted to add in addition to that is food sovereignty, which is the opposite of people just trying to grow their own food, kind of take back, maybe practice more indigenous methods of growing and sharing and accessing food. And so that's kind of a movement, more of a grassroots movement to kind of overcome those things. So I just thought I'd include that in case you hear them. The food justice movement is very grassroots, and it's a community's response to food insecurity to provide healthy, affordable access to nutritious foods. With the also inclusion of culturally appropriate foods, which I know you guys try really hard at including in the pantry as well. So just words sometimes you hear thrown about and you wonder, what does that mean? So I thought that might be helpful just to kind of get some perspective on that.
As we address food insecurity in the suburbs, can you talk a little bit about the importance of collective impact and coalition building?
Absolutely. So I was really happy to hear that your Vista did a needs assessment. It's always nice to keep a pulse on the community because it's ever changing, right? Even with the census, like that's every 10 years. By the time you get the data and it comes around to doing any type of action, like communities have changed already, so already with the 2020 census, we know things are already kind of shifting because we've had the pandemic and it's just life is a lot more dynamic than, a 5-year survey. So a needs assessment, especially when you have such great coordination and collaboration in New Albany, like, yourself, is a great opportunity to just kind of put an ear to the ground and figure out what's going on, what do people need, where are there gaps in services that we're providing, and how can we do better, and if we're not coordinating enough, how can we coordinate? And typically this collective impact framework, it is like a theory that's put into practice, but it requires like a backbone organization. So someone who kind of is the facilitator or the mover and shaker of the group, and then people just kind of talking to each other about like what new programs are there, what new policies are out there, it's the schools talking to the pantry that are talking to, another community organizations that are talking to the economic development and chamber of commerce, it's really just a round table. So, that's something in terms of call to action, I really encourage is maybe doing a needs assessment to figure out, take a pulse and figure out where are we at, what do we need to do, how can we do better. I think you mentioned maybe you did one a while back, but it's a good opportunity, and also including people in that process that are representative of your community. Not only are they going to be able to help you get better data and collect more responses, but that's a great example of empowering and uplifting people who are part of the community, because the more you see that representation and positions of leadership and administration, you're really creating a more inclusive environment.
It was interesting, when the pantry was just starting, I had an opportunity to speak with the teachers and some counselors and at the school, just trying to understand the landscape that we were getting into. And that's something that they said. They really felt like this underserved population in the community was here, has probably always been here, but they were like the silent, invisible, I think she used the word invisible population. Like, we see them, the coaches, the teachers, we know they're here, we're using our own money to help them. But there's not been a collective community-wide effort to understand that they're here, understand the needs, and then attempt to meet those needs. So I feel like we're beginning in that vein, perhaps, right? And so this collective impact framework and that coalition building, those are the right ways to kind of go about that. And equitable civic engagement, I think we spend a lot of time just talking about that. They need to be at the table, right? Because I read the community assessment that was done by, I think, Franklin County Public Health a few years ago. It's a great report. It was packed with valuable information, but it didn't at all, allude to an underserved population in the community. So maybe that's an opportunity to revisit something like that. Can we talk maybe about the chats and then NIMBYism and stigma?
Oh, yeah.
In any order.
Oh my gosh, wow, that's like, do we have another hour maybe to talk about this? So, yeah, just kind of to continue on the same thread of collective impact, Franklin County Public Health also has what are called community health action teams, which really marry well with like a food pantry in terms of like people that are all, wanting the same things, have the same vision and mission, and help trying to create a healthy community. But that's an opportunity to kind of, if you needed a little bit of structure and format a community health action team. I live in Whitehall, in Columbus, which is, wedged in between Bexley and Reynoldsburg. But we have a chat, and it's nice because we've got people from, we provide mental health services in schools and, just residents and people that kind of collectively get together and talk about like how to make a healthier community. So, it's worth reaching out to them, and I can connect you to folks there too, to create a community health action team, food councils, and then, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, so I meant to insert this when I was talking about suburbs, but, when I kind of mentioned what pushback looks like, but this is another like planning term and an acronym, but NIMBY means like not in my backyard, and NIMBYism is practicing that. So feeling like, yeah, food pantries are good, sure, but we don't really have that here. We don't need that, when in fact you've heard whispers of, there being a need in the community. And food insecurity, especially in suburbs, is stigmatized because, the idea of a suburb is, moving on up and, you don't have that, but that's not what the data is showing, and that's not how things are trending. When we started this conversation, we talked about how poverty is growing fastest in the suburbs than anywhere else, and then rural and urban communities combined. And that's been a national trend for at least 5 to 10 years now. So, what can we do to reduce that stigma, because there's going to be personal stigma people have, but the more we, really share out our message and our services and who we are, we become more accessible to people, and maybe they only need to come to the pantry for like a month until, they get their first paycheck from that job, or maybe there's an illness in the family that's really, wiping people out, their bank accounts are really depleted because of health insurance, because of healthcare bills, So again, situational stuff, but as much as we can do to reduce that stigma. And again, there's a difference between hunger and food insecurity. Hunger is like your physical response to hunger, that pain you feel in your belly. But food insecurity is just not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. So you may not stay hungry, but you can still be food insecure. So just kind of making that distinction and understanding it doesn't always look like you think it looks, I think we also saw parallels to that with the opioid epidemic, right? You think of like addiction and substance use prevention in a certain way, but really it doesn't have a zip code, it doesn't have a boundary. There's, it's everywhere. It has no zip code. So just keeping that in mind, and and you all and the work that you do in your communities and the activism that you do, keeping in mind that there are people out there that may not ask for help, but if you just share the message and say, hey, it's there, they're great people, go visit them, and creating a community more conducive to that kind of sense of inclusivity and collaboration just uplifts everybody, right? So.
And I would like to open up the floor to questions if anybody has any. I have more, but I feel like it's always a great opportunity to throw it out there. If you have any thoughts, Dr. Robbins.
Do most of the suburban communities in Central Ohio have food pantries?
Yes, yeah, and you probably are connected with all those folks too, but yeah, there's one in Worthington, there's another for Arlington, there's several in the University District area. Most, if it's not within that zip code, it's very nearby, and some of the pantries serve a couple different zip codes that are kind of central. You see that more in like rural, communities, absolutely.
They're tied in with the mid-high.
Most of them are, yeah. Some of them are, me and my colleague Glenn call them rogue pantries, you know, they kind of do their own thing, but, and then for various reasons, you know, if there's a high, population, or if there's a high percentage of undocumented people, especially, they may not like to be put in like a pantry track system, you know, so there's that. And there's always a way to, serve those folks, but yeah, most people have found the benefit of being a permanent pantry.
How do families find out about the pantry?
How do families find out about the food pantry is the question.
Yes, so we work closely with the schools. We have a strong partnership with them, and so we send our information out through the food services department. We ask them to share it with the families that are on free and reduced lunch. We also work with the counselors, the assistant principals in the school buildings to let families know about our services if they are in need of them. We also have partnerships with local faith organizations, as we mentioned earlier. All Saints gave us this beautiful donation today. So we ask them to please share our information with any families that they find might need our services.
Is it, to qualify, is it based on income strictly?
We do ask families to self-report the income. There is a form that we ask them to sign as a partner agency with Mid-Ohio. And then our service area is the New Albany Plain Local School District, the 43054 zip code, and then any employees of the New Albany School District.
I think I read somewhere or heard it through the grapevine that the food pantry started in someone's garage.
Yes, sure, like that. Well, it's a long story, but this iteration of the New Albany Food Pantry started in my garage. Yes, it's like my third child. I love it dearly. The other question. See how much time? 23. Anything that I missed that you want to just throw out there? And no pressure, because I have 55 more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I really look at you all as the experts in your community, you know, like I don't know as much about what you know, so, you know, I'm interested in knowing kind of maybe what gaps do you see, and, you know, what opportunities do you see, and, you know, anything we're missing in this conversation, you know, just kind of, yeah, you guys are the folks that.
One more. How often are you open?
Oh, there you go.
We are open the second and fourth weeks of the month on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So families are able to come and shop twice a month.
Okay.
And I would ask, just because I'm curious what Jennifer would say, what are some of the pantry's greatest needs or challenges right now?
Oh, well, increasing awareness in our community that there is a need for food pantry, that we do exist, educating our community, and just sharing who we are and what we do and how we can help. And then, as you've seen through your tour of the pantry, we need more space. And as I mentioned earlier, the need for our services has increased significantly. So we are looking for more space. We have a couple storage rooms upstairs here in this building, but space is definitely a concern of ours.
And I guess we have to also say, we just have to praise, I think, the volunteer staff that works here. It's unbelievable. I've never seen more dedicated, caring, selfless people in my whole life. They come back week after week after week for years upon years, just out of the goodness of their heart. And I think what makes it really special is the way they serve. If you have the opportunity to volunteer, if you jump on sign up as soon as it comes out, you'll get on it, because that's what you have to do to get into the volunteer. It's wonderful. But it really, the dynamic in the pantry, they serve truly with the spirit of hospitality, as though you're having a friend over for lunch. It's a beautiful community connection. So the more we can do that, you see people of all walks of life, every shape and size from all over the world come in and feel at home, and everybody knows each other. I mean, it's the coolest, funnest place to be, like on the weekend. So if a food pantry can be that, I mean, I can't get any better than that.
It is, they're the heart and soul of our operation. I mean, we can do what we do without them. They're amazing.
The volunteers are
They
unbelievable.
are.
And what I've seen in other pantries even is like, patrons that would frequent the pantry then want to give back in some way, you know, so they then become volunteers. So it's just this wonderful community of care of people that are, you know, they want to pay it forward too. They were once helped and they wanted to, you know, help extend that opportunity to others.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And really just harping on like the services, because it's not just food, right? Like we know that food insecurity is a social determinant of health, but there's so many other factors. Back in the day, I'll just say settlement houses were a thing, right? Settlement houses were a place where people could go for anything that they may have needed. You know, I think we still have technically one settlement house in Clinton, I'm blanking on the name, but the Jubilee Market is an extension of that. But 16 is it?
Yeah.
Is it 16? Yeah. Is a settlement house, and so those are places where people can go for classes or training or, you know, just really anything, because everyone could use a little boost and some uplifting, some empowering, you know. So I really have seen a lot of food pantries kind of almost transform into those settlement houses, filling in the gaps where there aren't services in the community. But yeah, I've never seen like any investment into a food pantry go to waste, you know, because it's always like your return on whatever investment there is monumental, whatever, for whatever community needs. And just understanding the needs of the community, that are so tied to the school. And so I'm excited to see.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time today. It's been really wonderful talking with you. In your packets, there will be some information for you just to read up on. There is a flyer in here. It's called Hunger Action Month, 30 Ways to Help in 30 Days. So if you're thinking, how can I help? And I think Karima mentioned it too, just your willingness to be here and care and think about this and talk about this. That personal investment means so much. So thank you so much for your time today. If you haven't eaten, please grab pizza and cookies on the way out. We don't want food to go to waste at the treatment. So take it with you. We will be back in October and November. In October, we're going to talk about substance abuse in New Albany. We're going to bring in New Albany local schools and the police department resource officer, as well as a bedroom we're going to set up where kids hide things, and we're going to have parents come in and get educated about where to look and monitor substance abuse for families. And then November will be the Center for Family Safety and Healing, talking about domestic violence. And then December, we're going to kind of recap the year, invite all of our speakers back, so hopefully you can come just to celebrate, say thank you for all the beautiful work you all have done this year. So thank you all for your time and interest, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.